Oh my gosh, Banff was so exciting. It was so many months of preparation, planning, all culminating in getting to the line on June 10th and being there with 200 or so people, crazy, passionate bike packers from all over the world that had the same kind of excitement of riding to Mexico.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host, Bella Malloy, and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Jen Adams. It's fair to say Jen is an accomplished lover of the outdoors. She's a champion ski marathon racer, wilderness backcountry canoe guide, and ultralight hiker. More recently, though, Jen has fallen into the world of bikepacking, and she really has gone all in. In 2022, she and her husband Eric bikepacked 8,800 kilometres across North America, taking in the grander parts of the Log Drivers Waltz and the Tour Divide. Now, the Log Drivers Waltz is actually something which they both curated and mapped out themselves. An 800-kilometre circuitous route taking in the best of the Ottawa and Canoe valleys. The Log Drivers Waltz Grand Depart is a free, unsanctioned, self-supported multi-day bikepacking ride with an emphasis on participation and enjoying the route. Some riders tour the route in 8 to 10 days, and others really push the limits, testing themselves to do it in the shortest time possible. Jen herself is particularly focused on having the event be as inclusive as possible, in a bid to get people from underrepresented groups to participate in this part of our sport. To this end, she hosts the Bikepacking for All panel, as well as bike mechanic workshops, all in the spirit of helping to break down the barriers to participation. I'm looking forward to chatting with Jen today to uncover her love of this sport and learn more about the Log Drivers Waltz, an initiative she's taken on board herself to showcase that the sport of bikepacking is one which we can all participate in. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Bella. Thanks for the opportunity to talk all things bikepacking and Log Drivers Waltz.
Oh, I'm super excited for this chat today, Jen. I feel you and I both have a similar part of a passion project where we are trying to showcase that our sport is one and one for all. But Jen, a question which I start my show with, and I ask this to all my guests, is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I do, and it was a little blue bike that I'm sure my parents got at Canadian Tire. Canada has this chain of hardware stores that sells very serviceable bikes. I wouldn't take a Canadian Tire bike down the Tour Divide, but they sell a lot of bikes, and my parents went and got my older brother and I, a bike each, and I remember very fondly my dad running with me to get my balance going, and that feeling of taking off. Once I found that balance, with lots of running up and down the street with my dad, I took off and loved bike riding ever since.
Jen, I always feel like Canadians are born with this adventurous spirit and this outdoor soul, and bike riding certainly goes with that. But it'd be remiss of us to do a podcast without actually going through how the outdoors is featured for you. Obviously, growing up, the outdoors has been a big part of your life. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. I have had the good fortune to be born into a family of adventurous parents. My father bought his first canoe with his first paycheck, I think. He bought a canoe. It was one of the first things he could buy. And he bought my mom a pair of rubber boots when they were courting to be able to go into the bush. And they always planned really adventurous holidays for our family. I have 3 brothers, and we have seen a lot of our big, beautiful country under our own power. As a family, we did a 17-day canoe trip across Algonquin Park. where we were able to take the train from one end of the park to the other and load our canoe back on the train to get back to our vehicle. And we've hiked the West Coast Trail when the wardens didn't want to allow us to go on to the trail because it was so rough. They looked at my little brother and said, "This is too rough for a young family like this." But we went ahead and had an amazing hike of the West Coast Trail, and lots of big summer adventures and winter as well. We'd do really, really fun things in the winter, ice fishing, and we'd skidoo into the backwoods and cross-country skied as a family. And I have great experiences growing up doing all kinds of outdoor stuff with my family.
Oh, I'm so envious of that type of growing up. I'm just thinking like a 17-day canoe trip. Wow. And it's interesting actually because that type of adventure I really assign to like Canadians as well, like with the idea of getting in with a canoe. The canoe seems like a quintessential Canadian tool for over water adventure. Would you agree with me on that?
Absolutely. It opened our country. The first mode of travel to get around in our country was canoeing. The rivers were highways to explore and to develop the fur trade, of course, that opened up our country to the west.
I love that idea of a river being a highway, but you're really right. And I think of things like the rivers, some of the lakes you've got there, but you also talk about in the wintertime, ice fishing, but I guess backcountry ski touring and stuff would go hand in hand with that as well. And it's definitely something that you still actively participate in now, obviously.
I do. I absolutely love cross-country skiing in all its forms. And just this past weekend was the Canadian Ski Marathon, which is an annual participation event. It's not a race. It's very much an event of participation for people of all levels of ability, ranging from people that come every year to ski just one section, or people that do the whole thing, which is it's 100 miles or 160 kilometers over 2 days. And there are 3 different categories of people that ski, well, actually 4 categories of people that ski the whole distance. And in order to ski in the gold category, you have to graduate from the bronze category, which is just skiing the whole distance, 180 kilometers over the 2 days, to silver, which is carrying a pack with enough weight, 5 kilogram weight minimum, that prepares you to ski the gold, which is skiing, being self-supported to sleep out overnight and ski the 80 kilometers on the Sunday after sleeping outside. So that's something I absolutely love to do. I did it with my family as a kid, and I did it as kind of a racer with my university team. And then I did it with my kids all the way up to gold. And one of the greatest things as a parent was being in gold camp with my kids. So it's a big event. And this last weekend, I skied not the whole thing, but I skied 5 sections with my 13-year-old niece and 2 of her friends, and we just had a blast.
You know what I was thinking there when you were telling me about how the stepping stones to go from bronze to silver to gold, it's almost, if I was to relate it to our sport, bronze could be people who want to go on a bikepacking trip or something, but it could be like the credit card tour, and maybe they're staying in motels and maybe they're having their equipment ferried along from one to the other. Silver could be they've upgraded to bikepacking and they're taking some of their kit with them, but they're still staying in accommodation overnight. And gold would be they've just become the ultra cyclists. They're going ridiculous distances and they're lightweight and they're sleeping out night and they're doing the same again. It's sort of like that same graduation. Because I feel, Jen, the experience that you have equipped yourself with from all these different outdoor pursuits from growing up, it's almost like while you were being created in the womb, you had all these skills being dispersed into you from your family as it was. Like I think there was no hope that you could be an indoor city lover in the family that you grew up with. I feel that experience must only be able to hold you in good stead for taking on the type of things that you've taken on in the cycling side of our sport as well.
For sure. I love building on experiences taking good experiences in one situation and carrying those forward and building on good experiences. And for me, challenging things are enjoyable. And my parents were strong believers in challenge. For kids to grow up with challenging experiences was something that they actually created the opportunity for, consciously setting out to take on big challenging things. And so building on all kinds of experiences has been something I've always enjoyed doing. And as an outdoor guide, had lots of challenging situations with, wilderness canoe trips and hiking trips and dealing with other people's challenges as well.
I was just thinking that actually, because it's one thing to have that mindset for yourself where you've grown up embracing challenge. I mean, embracing the possibility of getting through challenges and having that sort of mindset to them. But I'm guessing there's probably many times as an outdoor guide where you have to help someone else along that journey with embracing challenge too.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of group dynamics, and getting a whole group down a wilderness river like the Nahanni does involve a lot of careful management of the group to ensure that everybody is up to the challenge and the strengths and weaknesses of different participants are matched, and the group as a whole is able to enjoy a safe and enjoyable trip.
Look, we're obviously going to get pretty heavy down into the joys of seeing the landscape transform while you're pedaling along on a cycling route. But there's so much of me here, Jen, just thinking about the magic of flowing down a river. I guess the different perspective of seeing a landscape change from the water.
Oh, yeah. Like we paddled the Yukon River with my parents and my kids, and 600 kilometers down this beautiful northern river through such huge dramatic changes of the landscape. It is a really special way to travel through the landscape. It's a real treat if you get to go downriver on a river like the Yukon that's 6 kilometer an hour or more current.
That's an amazing current. And I'm guessing stronger at times in different areas as well, no doubt. And
yeah.
It'd be pretty rare that you'd be going upriver for many long times of anything. Like, I feel I'm just asking a really stupid question, but do people go upriver?
For sure.
Just for the challenge, right?
Well, to travel across the country, you have to go upriver and downriver, and in between. You have to hike between river sheds.
The portage sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole. But when you were talking about the Yukon, I vividly remember my husband and I, we watched a documentary series of a father-son canoeing down the Yukon River. I remember my husband ever since has gone, I'd really love to have an overwater experience like that. I think I could get used to that type of a trip, but I'm such a bike rider, Jen. I've got good strong legs and weenie T-Rex arms, so I'd have to do something to these shoulders to build up to that. Maybe if we do that, we'll seek out a Canadian adventure and seek you out there. You could be the guide, and you can guide me through my own mental challenges of flowing down a river as well.
Well, paddling is a whole other skill set.
Yeah.
The strength of moving water is something to be very, very respectful of, and it's a big skill set to develop.
Have you only traveled along the river in a canoe, or have you used kayaks before as well and gone for a slightly sportier type of vessel?
Oh, yeah. Most of the river travel I've done is whitewater rivers, and I've paddled the Nahanni in a kayak. I've also paddled the Nahanni River in open canoes with spray decks and all kinds of different vessels.
And again, I imagine different techniques that come on board with that. So from paddling and from ski touring, I want to understand how you fell into the sport of bikepacking. Obviously, you cycled as a kid, but cycling as a kid is very different to multi-day travel on a bike. How did you get into our side of this sport?
Well, I've always loved cycling as a way to get places. To me, freedom of two wheels is something that it just really, really speaks to my soul. And I've done a number of pretty big cycle tours and got more and more into trying to explore rougher country. And I traveled down the west coast of North America on my own with panniers and I traveled in the Alps with my parents with panniers, and then just modern bikepacking is just a continuation of touring, but with new equipment that allows you to do wilder riding.
It was 2019 when you and your husband took on a route, which I guess sowed the seeds of going ahead and curating your own route in the Log Drivers Waltz, wasn't it?
Absolutely. We were actually planning on doing a canoe trip. My holidays from work were all booked, and we were scheduled to go off on a holiday. And I was madly looking at rivers that we could head to. And it was a wet spring, and the bugs were pretty bad. And so the idea of heading onto a river trip in the thick of bug season was going to be a particular kind of challenge.
Maybe one that you don't really want to embrace.
No, I'm not. I can deal with bugs, but I don't seek out really buggy situations.
And when we're talking bugs, are we talking like
black flies and mosquitoes?
Ugh, not fun.
At certain times of the summer, June, early July, they can be pretty thick in different places. And so I had not landed on a river trip that was really going to be a great holiday. And my husband had been reading about the Butter Tart 700, which is a bikepacking route. It was very newly published and written up in a magazine that he stuck in front of me, and I read this thing. And he had been talking a lot about bikepacking, and he was really interested in the Tour Divide, and I was warming to the idea, and the timing was perfect for us to actually, I read this article and it sounded like a really great holiday. And so it fit exactly what our schedule, and it was easy logistics to put our bikes in the car. We used our cyclocross bikes at the time, and we put together bags from what we had. I had a bike rack, and we just put bike bags on and drove to Southern Ontario, and we borrowed a friend's GPS unit, and our friend loaded the route onto the device. So we had one device between us. Eric had this thing, and he rode around in circles when we got to where we thought the route was, rode around in circles and had this machine beeping for the first time and said, "Oh, we're en route." And so we followed this line on the GPS unit for a week holiday, and we were credit card camping and followed this curated route that Matthew Cady made called the Butter Tart 700. It goes around really, really beautiful country that we had not ridden in before. We were not at all familiar with some parts of it, and we had a really great experience bikepacking a well-curated, challenging route for a summer holiday.
And so from your experience on that route, who had the spark to think, oh, maybe we could create something and give people that type of experience in our own backyard?
Kind of like the way we got married. It was both of us talking at the same time. It was on our drive home from Southern Ontario. Both of us, we were talking about what a great experience it was and how well we know the Ottawa Valley. We had done tons of riding with our kids in the area around where we live, and we knew that we could put together a fantastic route right around Ottawa. And it was very much on the drive home, we said, oh, let's put a route together, and we can put together a great route. It was a totally mutual idea of, yeah, this was a great experience and we can do this.
Take me through your approach then. Like, how do you go from the idea of, oh, we could create something to actually creating it? It's one thing to sort of go, and look at a map and know point to point where you could go, but it's very much another thing to navigate it on a bike And I want to know about some of the challenges that you've come across there in building this route.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of learning for sure. But we really started from our experience. Every spring, every 24th of May weekend, for many years, we did bike trips with our kids, 3-day bike trips from our house. Initially, we had 2 tandems, and we pulled a trailer and we traveled with our kids on these tandems, and then they graduated to their own bikes. But we would do a 3-day triangle from our house. We would ride south from our house, and we would camp, or we would stay in a motel, and then we would ride another day east, and then we would ride sort of back north, as an example. So we had many years of riding these routes out from Ottawa in every direction. And we had a very good idea of the Ottawa Valley as a whole and what it could offer. And we had a good idea of some of the best riding. And it was a question of linking up some of our best rides and connecting them to create this. We had a general idea with the Butterheart 700. We thought it's a great kind of distance for a week-long holiday. We kind of thought maybe 800 kilometers, and we went from there. Just like a general idea of a good distance, and this idea of going around the nation's capital. And then we jumped in. We kind of sketched out the broad lines of it, and then we actually reached out to Matthew Cady, who had tons of experience creating his Butterheart 700 route. And there was lots of back and forth, and he gave us some really great advice on how to map it out. And we looked into the fine details of really connecting the best roads. And we drew in all kinds of resources. Like, I'm a geographer, and I love paper maps and maps of all description. And, when we rode the Butterheart 700, I took a map of that area of Ontario and I sketched out our route to be able to plan our trip.
Nothing like a paper map to actually see it properly there as well. And I imagine your map reading skills would be next level too. I think you can't participate in the activities that you do without being able to get your bearings well grounded on a map as well.
Well, yeah, we had lots of fun looking at different map sources to really see if some of the routes that we planned would actually go through and weren't on private property.
I was speaking about this when I recently interviewed Jen Hammelman, Director of Routes Cartographer at Adventure Cycling Association. And I was saying, in Australia, we have this concept of paper roads where a road will appear on a map, and Google Maps now does this a little bit too, but it's actually through someone's property, or it was designed to be a road, but it's actually not. And I imagine you would have come across this as well. In fact, Jen, it'd be remiss to me to speak to someone who's created a route and then not find out a tale of misadventure, because there's got to be misadventures when you're building routes as well, or maybe just on someone else's. I'd love to hear a story of one of those WTF moments on a route where it says I should be able to go this way, but that's going to be quite an interesting way to go. I'd love you to fill me in on one of those if you can think of something.
Well, we had a lot of fun when we were developing our route.
It's a great insight into your mindset, Jen, because you embrace challenges, and misadventures included the word fun. So
every weekend we were out exploring, we were ground truthing our route in sections, and we would go and ride a section, and very often we would find obstacles. And we'd be riding along, and there'd be a section of ATV trail that we were really familiar with. and riding along and thinking, oh, we'll take the route down here, and come across a big new private property sign. Always really disappointing when we see these things. We had along the Madawaska River, which is just a beautiful river in our area. There are trails that go along the river, and we had ridden this many, many times and came along, and there was a big no trespassing sign. So we ended up having to go around a different way, but we followed up with trying to get permission from the landowner. And many, many times we have reached out to landowners to see if we could get permission to take our route through a beautiful area that has private roads through it. But in the end, our route is almost entirely on public roads. We do have permission through a ski resort, actually. In the northern part of our route, we have arranged a fantastic little ride through the ski hill area on a road that is owned by the ski hill, and we have permission to do that. But lots of times where we'd run into private property that meant, well, we can't take our public route through here. Off we'd go, finding the best way around it.
That's where adventure begins often, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, misadventure. But we always look back at it as an adventurous day.
Yes. Yeah, it could mean a long day sometimes.
Long days because if you're trying to connect something, and either it's a long day because you've had to reroute, taking a massive detour, or maybe you've had to hike a bike to connect something up as well.
Yeah, sometimes we would end up riding on roads that were on the map, existing as a public right-of-way, but very, very dormant, not used. And we've many times thrashed our way through very, very overgrown and jumbled little trails through the woods that are no longer the roads that they once were.
Oh, nothing like bush bashing your way through, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
Actually, as a team of two, it can go both ways. Generally, in my experience, someone's more on board with the bush bashing than the other, if that makes sense. And I guess it's taking that on with the spirit of getting each other through it sometimes.
Indeed. Yeah, it's we're very much a team, and there's a lot of checking in with each other as we go, and decision making. And the more critical the situation, the more important it is to be checking in and agreeing on the next steps.
Something that often happens in combination with creating routes like this is it's all often quite complementary to helping build tourism in areas as well. And I wonder, with the Log Drivers Waltz, it sounds like an awesome route, by the way, but would I be right to assume also that creating a route like this, which people could logically do in, a week, 10 days, shorter if they want to, longer if they want to, I imagine that the tourism opportunities for smaller towns dotted around the place would be quite cool and beneficial as well. Have you found that it's been embraced in that way as well? And has that been something that has actually just happened organically because through the creation of the route too?
Well, it's been very much a conscious effort of ours to develop our route in a way that will encourage economic development in these outlying areas. We love the back roads and the small communities that are around the nation's capital. Many of them are very, very, very small and have lost their original economic drivers, and tourism is a main driver for many of them. And we know that cyclists really inject significant dollars into communities that they go through. And we very consciously designed our route to take riders into communities, ensure that people can access services along the way. We do have a section of the route that is quite remote, and it's quite a long distance between towns. And so people have to be self-sufficient, or they have to look for the services that might be available that are not in a town. There are some bed and breakfasts that could provide accommodation in this long section. but it would be off route, quite a bit off route. We very much have designed it to bring people into these communities, and we go to big efforts to try to encourage people to make connections between riders and the people in the communities. Last year, we created these little cards. It's like a business card. It's a greeting card, and the card has our logo and it has our website on it, and it says, "I am riding the Log Drivers Waltz bikepacking route, and thank you very much for the services and hospitality along the way." And we give these to people that are in the Grand Depart, and we encourage them to pass them out along the way so that the service providers learn about the Log Drivers Waltz. They can directly go to our website and learn about our route.
What a great idea, because I think also the other thing that happens with that is it's another way of them being made aware of the tourism stuff that's coming to them as a result of creating that route, the Log Drivers Waltz. But also it's a talking point for them too. It's a sense of pride that they've been given something with someone showing their appreciation for them, but also they themselves would be talking to other people in the community who then would want to get on board and embrace things and stuff as well, which is just fantastic. And then it just builds momentum and builds and builds. I love that. That's so great. And I love that you've consciously taken the decision to find ways to link people to those services and connect them with those communities and actually help drive that tourism part of this route forward as well. I've certainly really appreciated when I've been on routes in places where you do realise that something is helping a small community out, but also that community's really embraced the fact that you're there as well. Jen, if I was to ask you to sum up the Log Drivers Waltz route in one word, what would that be? It's a silly question, but I often think if you have to condense it down, it gives someone who has no experience of something an idea of it as well. What would it be?
Well, I guess I've talked about challenge a lot. The Log Drivers Waltz really is a challenge that we put out, and it's challenge by choice. It is a route that is out there for people to ride in whatever way they want, but no matter how you ride it, it's a challenge.
And so would it be a route that, like, would you recommend it for a pure beginner, like someone who's never done anything like this before? Or what type of rider were you thinking when you curated this route?
We have some stepping stones for the pure beginners that we would encourage people to develop their experience. The Log Drivers Waltz is a route that we designed in part to prepare us to ride the Tour Divide. And we wanted to incorporate good elevation gain and also some good challenging technical riding. It's not super technical, but there are definitely mountain bikey sections, chunky rocks, and hike a bike. And it's also quite long. And so a beginner is someone I would encourage to do an overnight. Start with an overnight. And we have created a whole bunch of other routes beyond the Log Drivers Waltz that have features that are more accessible.
And I guess people can take that idea in mind too. There's two sides to that. It's breaking it off in chunks and getting the skills up to potentially do the whole thing, but also people who may not have the time to do the whole thing can still access and go for a long weekend or an overnighter or something like that as well.
We also have the half. This past season, we published the half Log Drivers Waltz, the half demi. Our route is in both Ontario and Quebec, and the idea of the half is to allow people to experience the Grand Depart and all of the great camaraderie and inspiration that is involved in being part of a Grand Depart. And for people who are not prepared to ride 800 kilometers or just don't have the time. And so it's less than 400 kilometers, and you get to ride for 300 kilometers with everybody that is riding the route. And then we cut off and head directly back to the start finish in Almont. And so you get the experience of riding the Grand Depart, but not the full distance.
That's a really great way of dipping your toe in the water as well. I love that you're evolving it and including these things because, again, and I mentioned it in my introduction to you, Jen, and I called it out specifically, you are all about increasing participation in this part of our sport. You're looking at ways of breaking down the barriers, and to some people, a barrier of a route that big is a bridge too far, but actually you could break it down into little chunks or even celebrate the fact you don't need to do the whole route. You can do bits and pieces, and we've got these little branches and these side shoots, or you can use it as something to prepare yourself for something even bigger. In fact, when I say that, you said you built it for your own preparation because 2022 you did head over to do the Tour Divide and take that on. I'd love to dig into the story of that adventure with you. What a challenge and an achievement. Which of you two had the idea to do the Tour Divide? How did that come about?
Well, very, very much it was Eric's idea for years preceding our eventual taking it on. And he really was keen on it. And the more and more experience I got riding adventures, the more and more I could see that we could really have a good time doing it and doing it together. And it was his initial drive, but then we were both fully in on planning and preparing to take it on together. It was pretty exciting to plan it.
I imagine. And so with the spirit of the Log Drivers Waltz, you curated it to help train you for it. You did the grander part of the Log Drivers Waltz as part of this trip too then, didn't you?
We published our route in 2020 and we rode it, but with COVID, there was no possibility of holding a Grand Depart. And we had never been in a Grand Depart before we went out to Banff. And Banff was our first experience of a Grand Depart. And then we
came back and did your Grand Depart there. So you did it the other way around. Okay. And for people listening who are hearing the word Grand Depart and have no idea what that is, take us there. Take me to Banff and tell me about your experience there.
Oh my gosh, Banff was so exciting. It was so many months of preparation, planning, all culminating in getting to the line on June 10th and being there with 200 or so people, crazy, passionate bikepackers from all over the world that had the same kind of excitement of riding to Mexico and setting out on this 4,000 plus kilometer ride, knowing that there were many, many mountain passes and potentially very muddy roads and rocky descents to take on and travel through the mountains over the spine of the Rockies to Mexico. It was so exciting to be there with other people and in the couple days before the Grand Depart. And then riding the trail and just connecting with so many people as we set out and began our journey.
I imagine for some people, being around the buzz of that would be energizing. For others, it could be nerve-wracking, I could imagine. Would it be a mix of both?
Oh, for sure. Just like in the ski marathon, it's a marathon. You can't start at a race pace. And it was really important for the Tour Divide, riding this long route, to start out and not go into a deficit in terms of energy and pace ourselves, but go as fast as our idea was to ride it as a sportif. And we were not racing it per se because we were riding it as a couple. And the race it's not even a formal race. It is an underground, unsanctioned event. But we relegated ourselves from the beginning because we were riding as a couple, and the people that are actually going for FKTs or counting themselves in the race are abiding by the rules of being completely self-sufficient. So not sharing any equipment or not drafting any other riders and only obtaining services that are accessible to everyone on the route. We were not racing per se, but we were riding at the same pace as a whole lot of people that were in the race.
Can I ask, when you set yourself such a big goal and you at the start line of such a big route like the Tour Divide, over 4,000 kilometres, Canada to the Mexican border there in Antelope Wells, you said that you were riding it as a sportive, you weren't there to be in the official results. But what sort of time or how long were you sort of thinking in your minds of what was achievable for you? What time frame were you thinking from start to finish? What time period were you sort of thinking about there?
We were looking at 29 days.
It's like just over 4 weeks.
It's riding 160 kilometers or 100 miles a day is the pace that we were aiming for. And there are a lot of people that aim to ride at that pace.
And what sort of milestones had you sort of had in your mind when you're training for it as well? There's some notorious sections on the Tour Divide and there's some notorious events that it's nearly a given you're going to hit a rainstorm at some stage, right? And you're dealing with altitude and you mentioned rocky descents, muddy roads, the heat in the desert and the headwinds. But what were the milestones that you were potentially looking both forward to and challenges as you embrace challenges? Talk me through the challenges you were sort of looking to tick off along the way.
Yeah, well, we rode a route in our area, somebody else's route. We wanted to ride somebody else's route that we were not familiar with. And we drove west of here to ride a route called the North of 770, which is through actually some of the country that the Log Drivers Waltz goes through, but it's a little bit further west than the Log Drivers Waltz. And we rode it specifically to see how it was going to be to ride 100 miles a day, day after day. So a nice 5-day ride of this 770 kilometer route worked out to be 160 kilometers a day. And that really gave us confidence that we could ride some really good elevation, and it was very much the back roads and lots of dirt roads and some trails and a little bit of hike a bike. And it gave us the confidence that we could ride at 160K a day. And so we went out with confidence that we could take it on at a good pace.
You figured out you could do the mileage that you were setting out to do, and you knew that you could deal with the terrain and the challenges. What was it like actually fronting up to some of them on the route itself? And when perception meets reality, what's that like?
Oh boy, every day was like the Canadian ski marathon is 160 kilometers. You ski 160 kilometers over 2 days, and it's a big challenge. And this was kind of like doing a ski marathon every day.
for 29 days.
In terms of effort, they were big days every day with the kind of climbing, sometimes we do 2 mountain passes in a day. Some days, we ran into, it was a year where there was a ton of snow in the high country, and we had to go over 6 mountain passes that were snow covered. One day we pushed our bikes for more than 20 kilometers through the snow.
Oh my gosh.
The year we did it, it made the New York Times because of the number of evacuations that were needed. There were many people that got themselves into situations that, because there was flooding and rain and snow and snow covered passes, and a lot of people got themselves into very dangerous situations that required emergency services.
Jen, this is where all your experience from your other sports was really complementary, because if anyone knows how to survive in that kind of situation. It's probably someone who's a champion in the Canadian ski marathon classes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we drew on all of our experience. We had some situations where we were making decisions together the whole day and checking in with each other. And we would make a decision based on all of the best information that we had at the time. And then we would agree to how we would go ahead. And then we'd get to another decision point and we would continually be making decisions together. And we drew on experiences we've had backcountry skiing hut to hut, where we were in the Charlevoix years ago and there was 60 centimeters of fresh snow that fell when we were out on our trip, and everybody else got evacuated out, and we had no tracks in front of us at all, and the markers were covered, and we got into a situation there where we had to be making decisions really on the edge of safety. We were definitely out of our comfort zone. We got through it safely, but we were drawing on that kind of experience on one particular day on our Tour Divide route. And we met Peter McSherry, who is the dot watcher extraordinaire.
Shout out to Peter. Hello.
Yeah. We met Peter on the Tour Divide and met her numerous times over the day. And we always had an option to bivvy during the day. And this was a day when we were soaked. It was raining and snowing all day. We were completely soaked and walking through snow, and always knew that we could bivvy. But we got to a point late in the day, it was getting dark, and we had decided we would stop and put on all of our warm clothes, which meant that we couldn't bivvy. We had to keep going. We put all our warm, like puffy jackets on, and so we wouldn't have dry stuff to get into. So we made our dash for Whitefish, the next town. And so we were stopped, absolutely frozen, and putting on our puffy jackets. And Peta came along the trail and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you guys." And she stopped and put on her puffy and took off.
Hello listeners, it's Bella here, host and producer of Seek Travel Ride. Many of you have recently gotten in touch with me to find out how you might be able to support the show. I am an independent podcaster, which pretty much means I sort of do everything. I research my guests, I interview them, I put their audio together and I do an edit of that, and then obviously I release the episodes and market them as well. It's been a great experience now for just over a year, and we have 60 episodes in the bag as well. But pretty much if you do want to support the show and show some love to the content that I have been producing, I have recently set up a Buy Me a Coffee account. It's just a way that you can financially contribute to the show and put some funds towards the running costs of producing this podcast. I'm very proud to be an independent podcaster, and whilst it does mean there's a lot of work on this show at my end, it's an absolute joy to bring it to you at your end. I have included a link in the show notes to my Buy Me a Coffee account there. So if you want to support the show, just click on that link. Once again, thank you all so much for your support. Now let's get back to the episode. It's one thing to be able to draw on experience when you've had some grim times and gotten through it, but were there moments where you did actually have the conversation with each other as to whether or not you should be continuing?
Yeah. Yeah, we did after an injury.
No, that doesn't sound good. What happened?
Not good. I fell not at speed at all, but I toppled over when we were trekking through the snow and riding a bit and trekking through the snow. And I ended up hit some snow. I was riding and hit some snow and my front wheel turned and I toppled over very slowly, but happened to fall not into the snow, but onto a very sharp rock and put a deep gash in my shin. And it could have been the end of our trip, or end of my trip. lots of questions were going through both of our minds. But we got down to the next town. And so managing over the next number of days following that injury, there were lots of questions of whether I would be able to carry on. I was relying heavily on drafting Eric's wheel, and I was weak trying to fight that injury and heal. And so lots of questions at that point, but we managed it. We took a break. I got somewhat better, better enough to carry on. And then I just got, once we hit the road again, I got better and better every day. And so finished healthy.
Did you have moments on the trip where you sort of had to nearly pinch yourself and go, wow, I'm here?
Oh, many, like every day. It was so amazing.
I want to hear about one of those moments. So a new question I've been asking guests is to tell me about a day on their trip. And I'd like you to give me a day on your trip. It can be any day you like. Take me there. But I want it to include something of this, one of these type of moments.
Well, it actually, the day that comes to mind is a day that includes the full spectrum of emotions. Often the highest highs come after lows. And when we were riding out of Wyoming and into Colorado, we had a most extraordinary day. Among many, like every day was extraordinary. But that day we rode from Wamsutter, which is after the basin, huge ride through the basin. We stayed in Wamsutter, and then we rode toward Colorado, and we rode along. And at the time, and this is common on the Tour Divide, it's like daily thunderstorms hit in the afternoon, and we were riding on this road that took us up over a mountain pass, and it started to rain. It started to rain really, really heavily, and we got ourselves over the mountaintop, and we were on this straight line road that went down the other side of the mountain, and we had the wind blowing us square in our back. So the wind was pushing us down.
That never happens. Whoa, that never happens.
So it's super steep downhill, and the road got muddier and muddier and softer as we descended. The rain was absolutely pelting. There was lightning and this huge deluge. So we dropped down out of the mountains down to this little town called Savory, to where there's this bunch of volunteers that provide food, and you can camp there. And we got down to Savory and out of the rain, and got there just as the place closed. And so it was still, it was raining, but then the rain stopped. We got warm, we got well fed, and then it was a decision of what to do. There was still daylight, but the day was quickly disappearing, and we were headed up into the mountains, leaving Wyoming and riding into Colorado. And it was real potential of getting into peanut butter mud, which is mud that stops you in your tracks. We knew from forecasts that the rain had stopped where we were, but there was rain up in the mountains, and there was potential that we were going to be riding into the rain. And it was also a whole long section of private property. So no chance of camping along the road until Brush Mountain Lodge, this iconic stop along the Tour Divide route. And so Eric and I had a very challenging discussion about what to do. And I was busting to carry on and go up. I'm very optimistic, and I figured we could ride the 20 kilometers up the mountain to Brush Mountain Lodge. One way or another, we could get there. So it kind of got late on us, but by the time we were deciding what to do, and Eric was keen to stay, but he went along with my strong desire to push on. And as we rode up this mountain, the heavens opened up. It was like this crazy beautiful last bit of sun that was breaking through the clouds as we climbed up, and there were coyotes that were singing from one side, or yapping from one side of the mountain valley to the other. There were like two packs on each side of us, and as we rode up, these coyotes were singing and the skies were opening up, and it was really, really spectacular mountain landscape. And we did get rained on, but we didn't get stuck in the mud, and we did roll in to Brush Mountain Lodge to stay there, tent overnight, and it was a pretty magical day.
Gosh, yeah, one of those amazing moments in nature you could not conceive without being there for it to happen for you, but one that you'll never forget. I love it when nature gives us those moments, and often it can be, those moments seem to be, it's almost like, looking back on the challenging times, they're the ones you always think of the most. And when you have nature give you something like that during one of those challenging times, it just makes it sound so much more memorable as well. I love that day finished at Brush Mountain Lodge. Wow, what was it like to be there?
Oh my gosh. Oh, that was pinch me. That was absolutely pinch me time. We were just so thrilled to be there, and the place, Kristen, has so much history with the Tour Divide, and it is an iconic place along the route. And we actually put a Log Drivers Waltz sticker on her fridge, among many amazing stickers. We were stoked.
And I've just heard the hospitality that she welcomes people there with is, second to none. It's just, her passion for it comes out, and it energizes riders. Like riders, especially on the Tour Divide, get in there so depleted but leave energized.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's incredibly hospitable.
Jen, it just sounds like your experience on that ride, just, did it meet your expectations, exceed them?
It was beyond anything we could imagine. It was life-changing. It was a very huge, marvelous experience overall.
Do you think, because obviously experiencing it there with Eric, it's so beautiful to be able to create shared memories there. Do you think it's something, and whether it's the Tour Divide or something else, would you ever take something that big on as a solo female?
That's a big question. We came back from the Tour Divide, and we had our grand depart for the Log Drivers Waltz, and I really wanted to ride our route solo and have the experience of listening to my rhythm and learning what my personal rhythm would be on an extended ride. And I really enjoyed it, and Eric actually really enjoyed his ride solo, and it was very, very positive for both of us. And it's a big question for the future. To take on something that big, I'm not sure that it's a big chunk of time away from each other, which...
That's a good valid point too. It's interesting because listening to you reflect back on your experience there, something that comes out is, I think deep down you've got all the skills and everything that you could do it. But also I think it's so valid and fair to say that I probably could do it, maybe I would, but actually I really enjoyed doing it with my other half as well. So do you think you'd both do it again together? Is it something you'd revisit? Are you that way that some people go somewhere, tick that off and want to go to new things? Would you go back and experience the Tour Divide again?
The Tour Divide certainly has a very strong draw to do it again. Every ride of it would be different, and riding it a second time would be super cool to know some of what to expect. So it certainly has a big draw, but there are also so many great adventures to be had. I am not so sure I want to invest that much into doing the Tour Divide again when I really, really love seeing new things, and a different challenging route somewhere else might take precedent for me. Would be, but we'll see.
Can I be cheeky and ask, is there a route that you have in mind, or is that still to be explored?
It's still to be explored.
All possibilities ahead of you there. Jen, something that I think's awesome that you have taken on board. It's one thing to participate in the sport. It's another to actively build something so that other people can have experiences, which I think you've created there. And not just the Log Drivers Waltz, but also the routes within the routes and the mini adventures that people can have in that part of the world near your backyard there in Canada. But something that you actively do is you yourself want to break down the barriers that are stopping people from participating. Something that is pretty stark is that we still don't have a great balance of participants who go to the start line. It's still overwhelmingly white male at most of these events. But you yourself are doing things and taking on initiatives that help break down those barriers. I'd love to talk to you a bit about that and how you started that and what you're seeing coming through from that experience as well.
Well, creating a route is just a tiny fraction of what has become a real passion project that is broad in terms of trying to support greater participation by underrepresented groups. And we created other routes to make bikepacking more accessible. But we've also done a bunch of things that create opportunities for women to see other women, connect with other women, and learn from other women that are bikepacking. And some very specific examples are we have hosted panel, and we're about to host another one, which is a panel that is specifically for an audience of women, trans, and non-binary people who are interested in learning about the Log Drivers Waltz and bikepacking in general, and creating in this virtual forum a safe space for exchange amongst this kind of audience. This panel will be followed the next week by an open panel that many of the people that participate in the first panel, also the audience, are welcome to participate in the open to all panel. And we have a hashtag bikepacking for all. Our message is trying to encourage people to see that bikepacking is for all. And our presentations are very much, we put a strong emphasis on bikepacking for all. And I organized a mechanics workshop for women and trans non-binary participants to create that safe space, a space where people could feel perhaps more comfortable asking questions or see themselves learning from other women. And one of the most fun things that we've had in the last year was these rallies where we've hosted 2 weekend rallies last year, and we're going to hold them again this year. And it's a really great way to get people out. People invite their friends, they go. It's just a weekend, and we have had close to 50% participation.
That's brilliant.
And we put a priority on registration for underrepresented groups to ensure that we get more underrepresented groups there.
That's so fantastic. And the thing that's really great is these things work. I recently had the absolute pleasure of interviewing the fledglings, 3 women, Berenice, Tamarin and Rosie, 3 Aussie women. There was the fledglings group was created, which sounds like a bit of a similar theme to what you're creating there. And it was about creating a safe space for people in those underrepresented groups to come together and break down the barriers of what's getting people to try these things out. And by all means, that was a raging success. They attempted the Mallee Blast in Australia, in regional Victoria. Unfortunately, Mother Nature gave them all the weather and all the peanut butter mud, and it was a mixed bag of finishes. But there were more women that rocked up to the start line for the southbound route, I believe, than men. And that was as a direct result of that fledgling group. And I think what you're creating there, it sounds like you're breaking down similar barriers, talking about things, making it possible, helping and mentoring through that process, the idea of holding mechanics courses. The fledglings, they spoke about having a overnight ride where they all learnt to bivvy together, which I thought was fantastic. That's really, really cool. But I love it because it does work. And it takes passionate people like yourself to start these initiatives, but the Rolling Stone really gathers up momentum, and you will be able to look back with pride at just what you're creating there, which is fantastic. I want to provide links to these experiences that you're creating. I'm conscious that unfortunately by the time our recording goes out, I think your forums will have been done, but how can people find out more about this type of stuff that you're assisting and you're getting on with there for the Log Drivers Waltz?
Yeah. One of the greatest barriers to participation is access to good information. And through our website, we are continually building resources that will support people's development of skills and knowledge to be able to plan a bikepacking trip that will suit their interests and suit their skill levels. So we also, through our website, we share stories of riders, and we celebrate people's rides through the storytelling. And we've got pages that people can send us their picture and write up and share stories in that way. Our website has our routes, the Log Drivers Waltz route itself, but also we've got almost a dozen other routes listed on our website. And one of the cool things that we have is Ride with GPS saw what we were doing, and they really liked what we were doing and offered us an ambassador account for Ride with GPS. So on our website, we have collections of routes, and people can go in and explore these different routes, and people can download these routes and use them for offline navigation for free without having to purchase a premium Ride with GPS account.
Oh, that's fantastic. Again, making it more accessible for people as well.
Yeah, you actually don't have to have a GPS unit. If you have a phone, you can navigate off your phone. It's not ideal, but
it's doable.
It takes away a barrier to entry. You don't need to purchase a GPS unit. So our website is a huge resource. Logdriverswaltz.ca is the Log Drivers Waltz.
I will provide links to it in the show notes for sure. I think what you're creating there is just absolutely awesome. And I hope that it's just one of many, many, many that we get to learn about in our area of the sport as well. And I really feel you're building something with some great momentum there.
We also have Instagram and Facebook pages that are continually trying to provide inspiration and encouragement for people to adventure. And we have a Facebook group of tips and tricks for the Log Drivers Waltz that is a very functional Facebook group, a very functional exchange of information. It's really great. A lot of alumni are part of this group, and people are asking all kinds of questions, and all kinds of people are chiming in with their experience. So it's also a great resource. And we even have a YouTube channel where we've got a few things posted of talks we've done and such.
Oh, fantastic, Jen. Well, listeners, I'll be providing links to all those avenues to connect with Jen and also the Log Drivers Waltz in the show notes. I think it's absolutely brilliant, Jen. Like all of my guests, I often get to a stage where I'm like, I could chat to you all day and I need to wrap things up, which has happened here. But I do have 3 quick questions to finish the show up with, Jen. The first one is music themed. You now, as a guest of Seek Travel Ride, get to choose a song that goes on the Seek Travel Ride playlist. Listeners, it's available now in Spotify as well as Apple Music too. If you just search for Seek Travel Ride, you'll see the playlist come up. Jen, if you had to pick a song to be the soundtrack to the Log Drivers Waltz, what would that song be?
Well, since the Log Drivers Waltz, the name of our bike route comes from a wonderful folk song, a Canadian folk singer. It is called the Log Drivers Waltz. And
you can't choose anything other than that then, can you?
yeah, it's a no-brainer to suggest that.
Who's the artist of that song?
Wade Hemsworth.
Wade Hemsworth. Okay, you are down there. Awesome. Okay, final 2 questions. The first one, you're given a choice that one day you'll be riding your bike, perhaps on the Log Drivers Waltz, and you can choose to perpetually ride up a never-ending climb or pedal into a never-ending headwind. Which one are you going to choose, Jen?
Absolutely the climbing. I totally got into climbing the mountains when we were riding out west, and I love to just get in a gear and just go.
Oh, I love it. I sort of had an inkling that someone who's choosing routes which are so climby would be a lover of climbs. So and you love a challenge. But then a headwind is a challenge. And I imagine you would have your fair share of them.
Yeah. Well, since Eric and I ride as a pair, we can spot each other off. I am definitely usually on Eric's wheel.
Good. Take advantage wherever you can. I'm all for that as well. All right, Jen, last question for you. I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but maybe you'll surprise me. One day you're going to be riding your bike just for 4 hours, but you have the choice to ride 4 hours on your own or 4 hours in the company of other people. And just to shout out here, it doesn't have to be with Eric. It can be with anyone you want. Which of those options would you choose, alone or with others?
Well, I absolutely love riding with Eric, so it's got to be with others.
Okay. I had a feeling that was going to be the case, but then I did wonder, well, you did like the rhythm of riding solo, so who knows? Either way, both are generally good options though, right?
Absolutely.
Sometimes people are very defined and I can just tell from the outset. I know what the answer is going to be even before I'm anywhere near asking the question. Jen Adams, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. It's been so obvious just hearing you speak, the passion that you have for this side of the sport. A passionate outdoors lover and adventurer. I love that you embrace everything you do, that you embrace challenges. And I love that you're embracing the idea of breaking down the barriers and getting more people to participate in this side of our beautiful sport of bikepacking as well. Thank you so much for sharing your story and experiences on the show here for Seek Travel Ride.
It was a tremendous pleasure to meet you, Bella, through this medium and through your podcast. I love what you're doing, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to share some of the Log Drivers Waltz story.
Oh, I'm going to be checking out the Log Drivers Waltz song when I press stop, so that's brilliant. Thank you, Jen.
Great to meet you.
Well, I think you definitely agree with me when I say that Jen has created something beautiful there with her partner Eric in the Log Drivers Waltz. And it's so great to see that something that is being created, this passion project, is just building momentum, breaking down barriers for those to enter into the sport, and seems to be creating a great community. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. And let's keep an eye on Jen and see what event she next turns up for as well. If you're enjoying Seek Travel Ride and would like to help the show out, I encourage you to click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. It's just a way that you can make a small financial contribution that goes towards the running of this show. I'm an independent podcaster, so I do all the work myself, from researching my guests, interviewing, doing the audio edit, putting it all together and releasing the episodes, as well as marketing. So any small amount is much appreciated. Until the next episode, I'm your host, Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.